How do you fight a monster without becoming one yourself? You don't. You become a monster by fighting with a monster, but it's actually a good thing to become a monster. You see, the difference is, and really this is the answer to your question, you could stay naive, and that's not good because you're vulnerable and you're not useful if you're naive. So that's a bad situation. So let's say, well, instead of being naive, you decide you're going to go confront the monster. Okay, well, the problem with that is that you become the monster. All right, so how do you deal with that? And the answer is to do it voluntarily. To do it voluntarily. Because if you develop your monstrousness voluntarily, then perhaps you can bring it under civilized control. Right? You can integrate that capacity for mayhem and destruction that you develop within yourself. You can integrate that within a comprehensive and properly directed practical philosophy. And so that means that you're disciplined. You know, like a warrior isn't a monster. So you have to align, you have to discipline your monstrosity. And you do that by developing it voluntarily. Look, you see this sort of thing happening all the time in classic hero stories. Like if you look at the story of The Hobbit, for example, like Bilbo. Now, Bilbo, when this Hobbit starts the book, Bilbo lives in this little protected area. So it's like the castle that the Buddha grows up in. All the bad things are outside of it. And the reason for that actually is because the kingdom is guarded by these descendants of great kings, the Striders, who the hobbits have some contempt for because they kind of look like tramps. Aragorn is one of them. So the descendants of great kings patrol the borders and keep the naive inhabitants of the Shire safe. And they're naive and they go about their day-to-day work and nothing really threatens them and there's no monsters around. And because they don't have any real challenges and because they're peaceful in their wealth and security, they think they're good. But they're not. They're just naive and undisciplined and relatively weak. And so they're not prepared for anything when all hell breaks loose. They're like bait. They're like prey, you know. So, and of course the wizard, Gandalf, knows this. Now, despite the fact that the Shire folk are rather small and a bit comical and tremendously naive, they do have a latent ability for courage and forthrightness. And Gandalf can really see this in the one hobbit, Bilbo. And so he tells Bilbo that darkness is brewing on the in the outlands, outside of protected territory. Absolutely classic mythological representation. It's the same in The Lion King, where Mustafa tells Simba that his kingdom is everything that the light falls on and that he's not to journey outside of that domain, right? That's out in the elephant graveyard and death and all of that. That's outside of the Shire, let's say. It's outside of paradise. It's outside of the walled city. It's outside of your domain of knowledge. Well, that's where malevolence and chaos brews. Now, you see that again in The Lion King, because that's where Scar and the hyenas go off to conspire and turn into what are essentially jackbooted Nazis before they take over the Pride Land. Same idea. Okay, well, so what happens to Bilbo when he goes off to confront the dragon? He has to become a thief, right? Which is very strange ethically, because, well, Bilbo wasn't a thief, and you think, well, it's better to not be a thief than to be a thief. And the answer to that, it's a very hard answer, very complicated answer, and it's not one to be dealt with lightly. It's not good to be moral if the reason that you're moral is because you cannot be otherwise. So that's the naivety issue, right? So naivety is not morality. And if you're terrified to be a thief and you have no skill at it and you're not a thief, that doesn't mean you're good. Now, if you could be the best thief in the world, man, you were one sneaky character and fast on your feet and a real strategic thinker and capable of breaking rules when necessary and scaling walls and climbing houses and infiltrating parties and plotting for the long run, and then you decided not to do it, well, then that's a whole different story. Then you're a moral animal, right? So you need that capacity for criminality. You need the capacity for criminality. You need the capacity of evil, and you need to have mastered that. And that's what makes you good. And so, well, that's what happens in The Hobbit, is that Bilbo has to develop his dark side, his shadow. And he does that, and well, he's a thief in a variety of ways. He ends up stealing the ring, which is really interesting. And of course, that bleeds into the Lord of the Rings. So, look, he doesn't get away scot-free from developing his dark side. Like, he's touched by evil from then on in. He's got the ring problem, and that's a big one. That thing that might possess him because he's got too close to it. It's like Harry Potter and his scar and the fact that he has a bit of Voldemort in him. It's exactly the same idea. Or the strange affinity that the Joker insists upon in Joker and Batman. When Bilbo comes back to the Shire, like, he's never one of the hobbits again. He's always an outsider. He's got a glimmer of magic and danger about him, and that makes people respect him, but they also think that he's unconventional in an unacceptable way, and kind of make a wide berth around him, because now he's contaminated with evil and the unknown, even though that makes him a much better character, all things considered, and a real fighter in the battle between good and evil, and the person who's gone out and confronted the dragon and got the treasure, all of that. So, well, the pathway from naivety to the full development of character is associated with the development in the Jungian sense of the shadow, and that's that capacity for mayhem and malevolence that needs to be brought under control. So, yes, it's complicated, and that doesn't mean that you're justified in going out and breaking rules because you think that you're building your character. It's not that simple. If you look at stories like Harry Potter, all of Harry's crew breaks rules, but they only break a rule when not breaking it would break a higher order rule. And that's still morally ambivalent, right? Because the best pathway forward is to violate no conventions, to do the right thing and violate no conventions. But now and then you're in a terrible situation where you can do a small bad thing or a large bad thing. Or you can allow a large bad thing to happen by failing to break a rule. That often happens in Harry Potter. So then you're in trouble. And part of being wise and oriented towards the good is to know when breaking a rule is the right thing to do, even though you shouldn't break rules.